Well, unfortunately, we're still having some technical difficulties, so we couldn't go live today, but that's okay. We still got a great show for you. We're ready for another very informative pre-election version of the Wayne Carlen Show. So with that being said, and without further ado, let's get started. Everybody, welcome back. I am Wayne.
And I'm Carlen, and I'm coming to you from the Hurricane Central, also known as the Gulf Coast. We're currently hosting Hurricane Zeta. So that tells you how far we've gone in the alphabet this year. And I want to welcome to this, the Wayne Carlen Show.
All right. Man, we first talked earlier this week. We were thinking, well, what are we going to talk about this week? It wasn't a lot going on, but since that time, it has really picked up, man. So we're going to get right into it. And as always, we're going to update you on the pandemic and other important happenings around the globe. And then we're going to get into our main feature, which is what we've dedicated the month of October to, and that's talking about the rules of dialogue. We feel like right now this is very important with everything that's going on in our country and in the world. So with this being the last show before the 2020 presidential election, if we ever needed rules for dialogue, man, we surely need it now.
Yeah, and so we really want to get to it now. And, like I said, we meet every Monday and we decide what's going to happen, and look like nothing's going to happen. And then out of the blue, and on Monday evening, this is what blew up in Philadelphia. And this happened to Walter Wallace Jr., a 27-year-old man in Philadelphia, was shot. And the details, I don't have all of them, but we know that there's been, of course, widespread protests, riots, looting, and just a lot of bad things happening there. I noticed that the Pennsylvania National Guard has been activated. And so it's just another one of these crisis situations in the United States that we have during this time. Just a terrible, terrible crisis. And if you look at the details, and this is the only thing that was made available, is that they had a video that was posted that showed him approaching the cops with a knife, and the cops telling him to drop the knife, and then the cops eventually shooting him. So that's all we've got. But I did see that there's a lot of just Philadelphia just exploded, like some of these other cities that we've seen in the West and in Seattle and Portland. So we've got a new one on the eastern side now, Philadelphia. So what's up?
This is a real tough one. I trained agents on defensive tactics, for years, 25 years, basically. And a man with a knife is a very dangerous situation, no doubt about it. We used to watch videos where a person standing about 20 feet away from you and your gun is holstered, they could get up on you and stab you multiple times before you can even get your weapon out. So no doubt about it. It's a dangerous situation. I saw the video, and it's kind of challenging to see. Obviously, I couldn't see a weapon. They said that he had a weapon in his hand. I haven't seen that yet. So the jury is still out on whether it's justified or not. But what it does bring up is the question about this whole defunding the police, or some people like to call it not necessarily defunding, taking money away, but putting that money into other areas. Like when you have cases of people, the police were called on this because he was having an episode. He was having a mental breakdown. It's been well known that he had suffered from some things in the past. And so, I don't know who called the police. I don't know if it was mother or whoever it was, but they were calling for help, not to have their son or brother or cousin or whoever he was killed. And so this is really going to be looked at in the new reforms that are in major cities, are looking, how can we, instead of sending a police officer with a loaded weapon in a situation like this. And again, this may be a little different, because if he had a weapon in his hand, he could have used that on someone else. We still got to wait and see what comes out of that. But maybe we have some people who know how to deal with this situation instead of immediately going to deadly force. So, that brings up the thing about 21st century policing, which is when the police officers, and this came about in 2015, 2016, when Obama was still president, where police officers once again go back to the way when they were in the neighborhoods. They knew, let's say the officers knew Mr. Wallace and they knew him by name. Maybe they would have been able to talk him down. Who knows? I mean, that's speculation on my part. But I do believe that 21st century policing, where officers now are back in the communities and they know families, they know business owners, they know the bad guys too. They know them all. And maybe with that kind of work and effort, we won't see people going to deadly force as quickly as they do. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's important, but it's kind of like if we play that out, and that's the hard part. I think the solutions are the hard part, because if you think about a person who's having a mental health episode, it's not like, and if they're having an episode, it's not like you can call a counselor at this point to talk to someone who's knife wielding or gun wielding or has a weapon that they could use against someone. So who would be the people to call? And so I think that might be a situation where you call the police. I think the only option there is that you have police, and within that police force, people who are trained, who can handle that type of episode once that is identified, because that's the other thing. How do you identify whether or not this is a mental health episode? Because what's mental health to one person who might be calling the police might be just a simple act of violence to someone who has faced this person after he's run out of their home and they're in the street being attacked, and someone just calls the police. And so it's very hard. And I think that's the key, that the solutions to this thing are very hard. But I think that's why I think when you bring up 21st century policing, which, what you're talking about, is the key, that we understand that we've got policemen who are more capable of handling all these situations. Because at the end of the day, that's what we need. We need cops who have the ability to handle all of these types of situations, because I don't think there's another way to do that at this time.
And I see you brought up Waukegan, and we had another incident there last week, where a young lady and a young man, I think he was 19 years old, and they were just sitting in a car, smoking a cigarette late at night. But police officers rolled up on them, and according to the witness, she's the only survivor, didn't have lights and sirens on, but came up and in her opinion, started hassling them and just messing with them. Well, she basically just drove off. And according to her, and we'll find out because it is being investigated, they just started firing at him. And the young man, sadly, was killed, Mr. Stinnett. He was killed. She survived, so she's a witness to what happened. But the officer was immediately fired, which, again, and that wasn't something that was done in the past. So there's obviously something there that the chief saw. And so that's still under investigation. But once again, how would, if the officers, had approached it a little bit differently, instead of just firing automatically, when apparently, according to her anyway, there was no threat. There was no threat of violence to them at all. So, I'm just 100% behind, changing the way, reforming the way policing is done in our communities.
Yeah. And, I keep going back to every time we have one of these, Wayne, I think what I used to say many, I don't know if years ago, but when we started talking about this thing, I'd always talk about it's leadership, it's leadership, it's leadership. It's amazing now how you see when these things happen, the reaction that they're giving to the police officers now. Immediately, they're either suspended, fired immediately. Whereas before, these things were, nothing would happen until there was either a cry or somebody said something. So you're seeing now leaders initiate more. And that still got to get back to that fact that they've got to be held accountable. And when we start seeing police chiefs getting held accountable when these things happen, then I think we'll see this go away. So that's what I say. I say we've got this systemically poor leadership, not necessarily systemic racism. People disagree about the terminology, but I'm just saying, put me in one of those jobs, I got it fixed. Guys get mad. They get mad when I say that. Like, put me there, I can fix it in a day. One day, give me one day. So.
And I don't want to make it seem like we're beating up on police officers again, even though these two incidents happened and they're very questionable. But I did see something somebody posted just this morning about back to Philadelphia, where it looked like a family had turned down the wrong street and was going in the wrong direction toward the police barricade and where all the police were lined up. And said they were trying to turn around, and you could see them turning around in the video or attempting to turn around. And the police officer just surrounded the vehicle, started breaking the windows, And apparently, according to reports, this family had children in the back seat, babies in the back seat. And you could see the police officers hitting them with the batons, breaking the windows out. And you could see them pull the driver out of the car. It's hard to see the passenger being pulled out, but that's what the report said. And they just started beating him. So this is going to be another, horrible situation here where the police officers who did that, not every officer was doing it, but it looked like it's about 5 or 6 of them who were involved in that, are going to be in, some serious trouble, because that was not the necessary thing for them to do. They could have just ushered them around, had them turn around and drive off. Just horrible policing once again.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about some of the things we got planned on the rest of our show today. We want to talk about this, the confirmation of our latest Supreme Court Justice, the Honorable Justice Amy Coney Barrett. This happened, of course, with a lot of stress and angst and from people on the other side of, I guess you'd say, the other side of the aisle. But we want to just bring up these 3 particular points so that we can highlight what this means to us as a country. As always, it passed on a partisan vote. All of our Supreme Court justices, or the majority of our Supreme Court justices, were always almost nearly unanimous unanimous votes when they came onto the court. But since, there have been some that have been controversial. Of course, everybody remembers Brett Kavanaugh, which was a controversial one. And you might remember even Clarence Thomas, which was controversial. But all the others have pretty much, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was, I think, a 98 vote. She got 98 votes out of 100. And so even based on ideological differences than people have in previous eras, you've had Democrats and Republicans who came together and understood that. I think those days are gone because we've politicized the court and we've made everything so political and it's conservative or liberal, and we're not into kind of understanding other sides and working with the other side. So this passed on a partisan vote, 52-48, all but one Republican, of course, voted for her. And so that'll have a legacy on what happens going forward. And the result was you got Democrats pledging revenge. And once again, so you see that this isn't going to stop anytime soon. And so they were talking about their options and what they're going to do and how they can change certain things within their power. And that was their whole issue. Remember, they were trying to remind the Republicans, just because you have the ability doesn't mean you should. But now they're saying, well, where we've got our power, we're going to use it. And that's what we keep saying, that those in power use it. Who suffers? The people. The people suffer. And so that's what politics does to us. And so, but one of the points she made in her confirmation speech, to her credit, was that she would not be used as a political pawn, which is a good thing to say. And that's got to bear itself out. And I think that's what the justices attempt to do. And I think it's what we do in our everyday political viewpoints and what the politicians in the House and the Senate do. They try to draw them into the politicization of the court. And I think the really good judges won't do that. And they will make sure they stay out of that. And that's what that's what they're there for. They're there to make sure that what the legislature does is done properly according to the Constitution, in line with the Constitution. They interpret the laws and ensure that that is what's happening when the legislature puts laws forth. So that's where we're going, and that's what should be happening.
They shouldn't be interpreting law based on their conservative viewpoints or their liberal viewpoints. That should not be a factor whatsoever. It should be just what you said, interpretation, correct interpretation of the law. So it's sad that it has become so partisan. It's unfortunate. So the climate we seem to be in right now. Yep. So, yeah, man. So what about the record-setting numbers that we're seeing right now in COVID resurgence? I just got a scary information yesterday here in my county. We've been doing good. We've been we use color codes out here, and we came out of what we call purple, which is everything is shut down. So now we're in, theaters are open, restaurants are open at limited capacity. My business is open, but we have to do it at limited capacity, still wearing masks and all that. But now we're looking, because cases have surged back to 41 cases a day, we need to be somewhere around 30 in my county to stay where we are. So it's looking pretty scary for us, but yeah, look at the US. Wow.
Yeah. And this graph here shows the, like I said, I've got, today I'm gonna give you about, in the next 30 seconds, 45 seconds, I'm gonna give you this comprehensive on what it looks like, because if you look at this graph, you can clearly see this is, of course, October 23rd here at the end, and it's really spiking up. You see how we had this high in early July to mid-July, was going down, headed down. And of course, in the September then time frame, you see we kind of started heading back up. Everybody's opened back up. Sadly, Florida opened up everything without restrictions, no mask required and all this. So the numbers are spiking up. So that's not rocket science that would happen. And so you can see kind of that there's a correlation between some of the things that people put in place. And so while I'm not a fan of shutting everything down, I think there are some reasonable things that we can do. And I think this graph kind of shows it, because California amazingly is doing better than most other states. And California, of course, Gavin Newsom is a shut it down type guy in a lot of ways, but I think he's doing a reasonable thing. And so it shows that their numbers, and I'm going to take you to a separate screen here, which shows what's happening across the country in this other graph that I've got here. So let's check this out. And this is a great website. You can go check out at any time. It's Bloomberg, and it's got some really good numbers. And so you see this, look at the new cases. And this is, okay, so this is October 28th, which is low for today. But yesterday is like the highest spike that we've ever had, you know. Maybe you got 85,000, or that was actually on the, where was that 85 I just saw? There was an 85. Yeah, right here. What date was that?
Yeah, you just passed it. There you go.
October 24th, we had 85,000. That's the highest we've seen ever. And that's what I think they were talking about, the highest we've seen ever. And now today we're back down. If you look at today, the 28th, it's like down here at 35. So not too bad. And so we don't know if that was a temporary spike, but what we do want to show you, and I want to go further down here, when you look at this map, this country map, and look at, as I was talking about, if you remember the map we showed you before, and it showed the most restrictive and least restrictive California. And even though it shows up today by 3.1, they've been on a downswing for a long time, because this is up 3.1% from yesterday. And they've been down on a downswing for a long time, and are doing better than most. And you can see that by the colors. The light yellow says that they're barely increasing, very slightly increasing. So you got that also for Texas, and you don't have a lot that are in this. You don't have any at the 15 through 20 increasing, except what's happening down here in Alaska. We don't know what that's about, you know. So they went up tremendously, and this is a 7-day rolling average that they use to compute this. So they went up tremendously in Alaska, way more than anybody else. So while it is a bad thing, and they talk about what's happening, it's moderate in some areas and more extreme in other areas. But most of this is this yellow, very slight increases. And like I said, this is a 7-day rolling average that they do. So when you go to one, you can look and see what the differences actually were. So I'm on Texas right now, and it says this is a change from yesterday. You'll see on the right side, it says from yesterday. So Texas, because they've got so many, 162 change in daily cases. And so that's 2.8% up. If there were 162 less, then we would be at 0, and it would be a different color. It would be that dark gray color. It would be at 0. So if you go look at a city like one like New Mexico, and you see why it's got this like light blue, like light gray color, because it's down. Change in daily deaths, like I said, it's a 7-day rolling average, so 0.4 less, so slightly less than 0 deaths because of the 7-day rolling average. So go to Bloomberg, and you can check this out. Really comprehensive, because it gives you a clearer picture than just what happened today. It talks about, you know, what the trend is. And I think that's what's important. And I think, you know, given all things being equal, I mean, I don't see really it's not a dire picture, but it is saying that there are some precautionary things that we can do to make sure it stays at close to 0% increases. You know, you really want that. If you have a change like Tennessee, change in daily deaths, they had 2 more than yesterday. Okay. So I think that would be more reasonable. And if we could stay in that area until we come up with the vaccine, I think that's what we probably want to see happen. So it's kind of where we are on the pandemic. Well, you get your pandemic update here at the Wayne Carlen Show. All right.
Right.
So.
Yeah, we were looking at San Francisco, which is about 30 miles from here, 45 miles at the most. They're actually moving into what we call the yellow, where more things are being allowed to be opened up. So San Francisco is doing really well compared to us here in Solano and other counties. So I'm amazed at that right there, because growing up in the city, everybody's on top of each other, very close, no space. We didn't have spaces in between our houses like you guys do in Texas.
Yeah.
There's no
Hey,
such
but
thing as
and
that.
that's interesting to see too, because when you begin looking at that, it's amazing. And I don't know what we've done or what we're doing. I don't even know if we know what we're done and what we're doing. But that was the issue. Remember, early New York was so terrible, and everybody was saying it's because they're packed in so tightly and things like that. And in these cities now, you're not finding that, and the people are still just as tightly packed as they were. And and I guess you could say maybe some of that is people are wearing masks, but I think there are some other things that might be at play that we're not aware of. And that's why I was telling people, if we can continue to stretch this thing out, I think we're getting smarter as we go along. And we might not in all cases know why we're getting smarter, why these things, because the death rate is tremendously down. I mean, before they said it was like 27%. Now it's down to like 3%. And so that's a huge difference. And so while I hate to sound like I'm endorsing Trump, but Trump said we're learning to live with it. I think there might be a little bit of truth in the sense that it's not nearly as more mortal as it was before. So the mortality rate is way down on it. And I'm not even sure if we know all those answers, but for whatever reason they are. And so let's roll with it as we continue to search for a vaccine. So pretty important. You're up, Wayne. Rules for dialogue.
Well, all right. So we're going to recall our steps again. You guys, those of you who've been with us over the last couple of weeks and even before that, you know them, but we're going to talk about them again. So remember, number one thing to do is to initiate. That's very important. Okay. We don't just want conversations just happen. Let's initiate. What are we doing here? Disarming. That's very important. It's a term that I use in martial arts. It's very important to disarm before moving forward. Humanize, and that's going to be important. We're going to kind of emphasize that a little bit today. It's important that we know who we're talking to. What things do we have in common? Permit, again, very important part of the steps in the rules of dialogue. Clarify, don't be afraid to go back and ask clarifying questions, or you clarify what you're saying. It's very important to do that. And then, of course, the last thing is discuss. Now we're ready. Now we're ready to have an open discussion where we respect each other, and let's see where this is going. So,
yeah, and all those rules are so important because, as I've been saying, in the political arena that we've got with elections coming up, the weather forecast for the politics is slated to be nasty and continued nasty from every front. And so we definitely going to have to do something to offset that. And if we can bring in a competing front with some civility with our rules for dialogue, then hopefully we can stave off some of that. All right. So that's what we want to do. And I want to spend a lot of time today really on humanize, because all 6 steps are important. But that humanize one I think is so important because it speaks to the fact that we need to give people the respect that they are at least human as we are, and we want to relate to them that way. You are not relating to someone as human when you call them a name. It's just simple as that. Name calling is just, it's got to be out of here. We've got to rise above that, the pettiness of name calling and degrading other people. We've got to get out of that. I was watching, because all the ads leading up to election, your local ads, are all campaign commercials. I mean, when you're watching a show, you go to they're all campaign commercials. And I just thought about how revolutionary it would be for one person to have an ad on there that says, I will not talk negative about my opponent. We are vying for the same position. I respect that they differ, and here's how they differ. But nevertheless, if you vote for them, I can understand why you'd vote for them. I would say vote for me for these reasons, but I respect my opponent. Man, would that be just so different? Change the whole atmosphere. But gosh, they had some of these things and they were just talking about this person did this thing and they were investigated for this. And and then one, it was so sketchy because they had next to him, they had these child predators or whatever, which was totally unrelated, but they put it on the screen so that the people could get confused and relate that person to a child predator. I was like, come on, people, you can't do that. All right. So we got to humanize people. And I say there's these 3 things that I think that we've got to do when we talk about it. And so we've got to stop, look, and listen. All right. We're separated. We got all these issues. Stop, look, and listen. I say we got to stop and we got to pause and before responding, what is the thing that is going to show that I actually care? I actually care about this person. I care about them as a human. Now, when you're in the middle of a quote unquote political fight, maybe you don't want to show that you care, but you should. You should, because it shows who you are. It speaks to your character, and in the rules for dialogue, it shows that you can be a human. And I think that's the key. People think these people are less than human. It shows that you can be a human of character, a person of character. So that's it. Stop before responding. Stop in the name of love. All right, that's what I call it. Number two, look at where we are, our status. You know, we're in a bad situation. A lot of bad things are happening. And the question is, the next thing that you do, are you going to pour gasoline on that fire, or are you bringing water? All right. There's this situation that's happening. What are you going to bring to the fire that's burning? Gasoline or water? And so look at the situation, then make a decision. And the last thing, stop, look, and listen. Hear not only what people are saying to you, but hear what's not being said as well. A lot of times people articulate things with their actions and the way that they approach things that is not being said. And so sometimes you got to hear beyond what's being said. Because if we took everybody at just what they said, then we'd say, well, they said that, but is that what they meant? You got to hear people's hearts. And I think that we go a long way in respecting and understanding their viewpoints if we did that. So stop, look, and listen. That's what we need to do. And that's a key to our rules for dialogue. We're going to need that this week, because a lot of bad things are out there. Like I said, the front is nasty, and it's going to get nastier as we go forward this week. So
People, humanize. You know, one of my daughters always says, Dad, you should run for this, you should run for that. And I'm like, well, issue is I can't play dirty. You know, I just wouldn't be able to get into that game.
You don't have to. I'd be your campaign chairman. We'd hit them with the civility dialogue. We'd hit them, man. Rules for dialogue. And they would go, these guys are different. Listen to them.
So win or lose, we still win. Huh?
That's right. Win or lose. I think people are looking for that, man. I think the first candidate who does that at whatever level, state level, national level, people are going to be so just drawn to that. Because, I mean, think about it. The rest of the stuff out there is so nasty. I think they'll be drawn to that. So.
Well, that's some good stuff, man. Some real good stuff today. Even though, again, we couldn't go live with you guys, we're going to get that right. But for now, we're just happy to be with you guys here today. And so don't forget, go to our website, eraseracist.com. We're looking for you guys to help us, not help us out, but be a part of what we're doing.
That's right.
You can donate, you know, click that donate button, and anything will work. So make sure that you do that. Or you can purchase some items. We got some really good items, t-shirts, some hoodies, face masks. We're still wearing those masks. Keep them on for a while. Okay. All right. And also we have our volunteer section where we need those of you who are willing to jump in with us and make a change. If you're tired of seeing things the way they're going on right now with so much just division and hatred, and I'm not going to say who's starting it because everybody has their own opinion of that, but we're talking about unity. So, and we're not talking about continuing on the path that we're on. We're talking about making some changes here in our country so we can bring people back together. So visit our website, check it out. And that's all for today. So we're going to see you guys again next week on the Wayne Carlen Show. Again, I'm Wayne.
And as you think about giving, you know, we might have to give so we can get better internet service so we can give Facebook Live, because we don't know what's happening. So we might need to give for that. So thanks for having Wayne. I'm Carlen, and this has been the Wayne Carlen Show. Now you know, now you know. Next week, we're gonna try to go live. We'll try to be live next week. If not, we're gonna have to hit you up for some more money, donations, so we can get a new computer system and the internet service. Thank you all for joining us today on the Wayne